It should have been just a routine inspection, but now only supernatural help could save him. We like to think our children are safe at home in their own bed, but sometimes even here, God may send an angel to protect them. And sometimes, in ways far too deep for us to fully understand, God, working through an angel in a seemingly isolated event, can affect us all. Angels don't always appear the way we imagine they might, but appear they do. And as you are about to see, it is very often to minister to and protect us from serious catastrophes.
Abraham.
Our first story has to do with a young boy who overcame the hardships of life, only to find himself back where he started, and in desperate need of help. Help from anyone, even an angel. On Chicago's South Side, jobs were hard to come by, and Willie's dad had little choice but to go wherever he could find work. This meant moving constantly from one tenement to another. With each move, Willie's mother also had to find a job as quickly as possible, leaving Willie to spend a lot of time alone with his grandmother. But it was time he came to cherish. In spite of all the difficulties, Willie Hawkins was part of a close and loving family. To most grown-ups, one neighborhood might be just like any other. But to a 7-year-old, an undiscovered city block can be very frightening. But Willie's grandmother found a way to dispel his fears. Willie's grandmother had a special ring, and they pretended it had magic power. The ring, they imagined, would always point the way to a safe neighborhood. It could also locate other kids for Willie to play with.
No friends. There it is. See, I told you.
Now, I'm gonna go to the market, and I'll pick you up on my way back.
I'm a little scared.
Oh, Willie, there's no need to be scared. I'll come back.
You promise?
I promise.
Okay.
Of course, the real magic was in the faith and love and courage Willie learned from his grandmother. When Willie's grandmother died unexpectedly, the young boy was devastated, and for much of the time afterward, he was left alone. Willie had never before encountered so deep and permanent a loss. His world, it seemed, had come to an end. Even the special ring that had been the source of so many wonderful moments between Willie and his grandmother was lost forever. But as the years passed, Willie grew to understand the deeper meaning of their relationship. His grandmother had blessed him with courage and a deep and abiding faith in God. And in spite of great hardship and against all odds, these characteristics helped him get through high school and eventually through college. By and by, Willie Hawkins rose to the position of chief building inspector for the south quarter of the city. Now a full-grown man with a wife and family, Willie Hawkins was respected and admired by all who knew him. And one trait for which he was particularly well-liked was his devotion to his parents and to the grandmother he had lost so many years before. On this particular day, and to Willie's complete surprise, the first inspection was in the very same building where Willie had been living when his grandmother died. Just the sight of the old building brought back memories he thought were long lost in the mists of time. And Willie, normally very cautious in these old buildings, let his attention wander. It was a mistake that would put his very life in jeopardy. Willie simply wasn't prepared for the flood of emotion that welled up inside of him. For a moment, the apartment seemed to him to be exactly as it was when he had lived there with his parents and his grandmother. This illusion proved to be a cruel deception. Suddenly, the image of Willie's childhood gave way to the terrible reality. The force of the impact instantly broke several of Willie's ribs, and one of the broken ribs had punctured a lung. Willie lay helpless, slowly dying, in a part of town where no one would come to his aid. Then, several blocks away, a police officer on routine patrol encountered a woman desperately calling for help.
Can I help you?
Yes, please hurry.
Where to?
105th and Sturdivant.
I didn't think anybody still lived in that area.
Please hurry.
Officer Polcheski was surprised at the young woman's sense of urgency, but it seemed to be infectious. Almost without realizing it, he found himself rushing to the specified address.
Stay in the car. Jeez!
He's in there.
But you were just...
In the basement. Please.
Hey, friend, can you hear me?
Seeing that Willie's injuries were indeed very serious, Officer Polcheski instantly called for an ambulance.
Dispatch, this is 311.
Now the officer's biggest concern was time. He knew they would be lucky if an ambulance could get all the way across town in less than half an hour. He didn't know if Willie had that long. But against all odds, an ambulance was in the immediate area and arrived at the house on Sturdivant Street in just a matter of minutes. The trained emergency medical technicians quickly stabilized Willie's condition and rushed him to the hospital. Willie Hawkins would survive his accident after all. While Officer Polcheski made his report of the incident, something unusual caught his eye. He assumed the curious ring that he found on the passenger seat of the police cruiser must have been the property of the young woman who had saved Willie Hawkins' life. Only then did Polcheski realize that she had vanished, not long after showing him where to find Willie. A few days later, Officer Polcheski checked in on the man he had helped save. His curiosity about the strange nature of Willie's rescue had nagged at him night and day.
Well, this woman, she flagged me down. I thought it seemed a little strange, but when we got there, she told me to go inside, even told me you were in the basement.
That's impossible. First of all, when I went to that building, I was by myself, and no one knew I was in the basement.
Well, who knows? There's a lot of strange people in this town. I'm just glad you're all right. Oh, by the way, I found this on the car seat.
Willie couldn't explain the ring,
Must have belonged to her.
but it looked very much like the one that had been buried with his grandmother. He hadn't seen the young woman, yet somehow he knew an angel had been sent to protect him in his hour of need.
And I really, truly believe I wouldn't be alive today without her. And there's no doubt in my mind about that.
Our next story has to do with the innocence of childhood and a mother who is certain she felt the push of an angel. Unfortunately, parents can't be every place at once. Perhaps that's why even the most devoted mother sometimes needs help through an angel.
My daughter Shannon was 3 years old when her stepfather and I married. We moved into a small 2-bedroom house in Angleton and became a very close family in a very short time.
Shannon was, in fact, a big part of the reason Janet and David had gotten married. David had commented many times on how lucky he was to have 2 such fine young ladies to love.
Give Dad a hug and a kiss.
But something was going to happen on this particular night, something that would change their lives forever.
There you go. Okay.
One evening, I put Shannon to bed at her usual time, and shortly thereafter, David and I went to bed. I checked on her before we went to bed, and everything seemed fine. I hadn't been asleep very long when I felt a gentle tugging at my nightshirt. I turned over to see that David was sound asleep. The tugging became more intense, and all of a sudden I was out of the bed and I was being physically pushed from behind.
The presence that was guiding her seemed to know exactly where she was supposed to go. In just a moment, Janet found herself entering the door to Shannon's room. Nothing appeared to be amiss. Shannon seemed to be sleeping comfortably. Janet was puzzled, but another firm push persuaded her to take a second look. It took Janet only a moment to realize that the mini blind was now open, and the cord that had been an entertaining plaything for little Shannon had now become a deadly noose.
I discovered that she had the mini blind cord wrapped several times around her neck, and her breathing was impaired. I immediately unwrapped the cord from her neck, and she began to cry and breathe normally, so I knew that she was okay.
Janet had arrived just in time. Another few minutes, and the little girl would have strangled in her sleep.
She was crying, of course, obviously upset. I sat at the edge of the bed and held her and comforted her until she stopped crying and could go back to sleep. I, at that point, of course, went and got a pair of scissors, cut the mini blind cord where she couldn't play with it again during the night. When I knew she was okay, I sat at the edge of the bed, wondering what compelled me to be there and how I had gotten to her bedside.
Janet had decided not to mention the incident to anyone. After all, she wasn't quite sure what had happened. But Janet hadn't been the only one involved, and Shannon had a question of her own.
Who was that lady in the room last night?
The next morning, she started asking me questions about the events of the night before. One of her questions was, "Who was that lady in the room with you last night?" I was startled for a moment, and I asked her, "What do you mean, what lady?" And she said, "The lady standing behind you." At that moment, I questioned her, who was the lady, or what did the lady look like? Did she look like your grandma's? Did she look like anyone you knew? And she said no, that she just knew that the lady was there to help us.
Janet had not seen anyone else anywhere in the house, but she had certainly felt a presence, the powerful, life-saving presence of an angel.
Half the miracle is accepting what's happened to you into your life and accepting it as a miracle.
Our next story takes place in the early 1800s, but the consequences of a visit from what seems to have been a ministering angel are still felt around the world. The determined pioneers who settled the vast green valleys and hills of America's heartland did so with one hand on the plow and the other reaching out to God. The need for faith in a kind and watchful providence was everywhere in evidence. But nowhere was that more apparent than when it came to having children. A doctor within a day's ride was a rarity, and a midwife close by was someone to be treasured. A complicated childbirth was always a matter of life and death. The hour was fast approaching when their baby would either be delivered or both mother and child were likely to die. Thomas and his wife Nancy had worked hard for years to prepare for their first child. This was to have been a moment both would cherish forever. Now, even though he tried to hide it, Thomas feared the worst. Not only were they on the verge of losing the child, he could lose his precious Nancy as well.
He's gone. The doctor is gone. There's a bad accident under Lexington. He won't be back for 2, maybe 3 days.
And what about the midwife, Jeb? Did you find her?
No, sir. She's back east visiting some relatives. What are we gonna do now, sir? There's just no one around to help.
It'll be all right, son. You've done all you could. You go on home. I'll take care of things. The doctor's not going to be able to come, Nancy. And the midwife is nowhere to be found. I guess we'll just have to come through this one alone. We've done that before. We're going to come through this okay. It'll be all right. All 3 of us.
Thomas. Yeah. Promise me something.
Of course.
Promise you'll save our baby, no matter what happens to me.
Don't talk like that. You are not going to die.
You must go on, Thomas. You and our child, no matter what. Promise me, Thomas. Promise.
I will promise you only that I will never let you go. We've worked too hard. We've come through too much together to be separated now.
I love you, Thomas. Always remember that.
Our child will need both of us. I will have it no other way. Yes?
Hello, my name is Sarah. Sarah Parsons. I'm a midwife. It looks as though I've arrived just in time.
Yes.
Thomas knew everyone for miles around, but he'd never heard of Sarah Parsons. And yet the mysterious woman seemed to know exactly what had to be done. Something about Sarah's manner put them both instantly at ease. Even though she was a complete stranger, Nancy had no difficulty putting herself entirely in Sarah's hands.
Is there anything I can do to help?
You are a carpenter?
Yes, I am.
I'd start work on a crib.
A crib? Yes, I will.
Nancy's labor was intense, lasting for most of the night. But the hard work of mother and midwife paid off handsomely, with the birth of a healthy 10-pound baby boy. Sarah Parsons had performed a miracle. Nancy's life was preserved, and a new baby boy had come into the world. But as Thomas would soon discover, that was only the beginning.
Sarah, please, let us pay you for your services.
Oh, I have no need of money. But there is something you can do for me.
What can I do?
Make sure the child is named Abraham.
Abraham? Abraham?
Thomas couldn't just let this mysterious young woman simply walk off by herself. He made up his mind that he would at least walk Sarah part of the way back to town. But in the few seconds it took Thomas to reach the road, Sarah Parsons had somehow disappeared without a trace. Thomas and Nancy and the new baby rested comfortably that night. Little did they know the events of that day would reshape the world. Thomas and Nancy refused to give up hope when all seemed lost, and they brought into this world one of the greatest men the American nation has ever produced. They named him Abraham, just as their mysterious visitor had requested. Growing up on the frontier, the boy came to be known as Honest Abe. Against overwhelming odds, he became a lawyer. And in 1847, Nancy Lincoln's son, Abraham, was elected to Congress. 13 years later, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln became the President of the United States. No one had ever heard of Sarah Parsons, nor was she ever seen again. It would seem that one of God's ministering angels was there to save not only the tiny baby, but an anguished nation as well. Some say every life is a miracle, but the birth of Abraham Lincoln was apparently attended by more than just a midwife. We have seen 3 stories that seem to demonstrate some of the miraculous ways God chooses to minister to and protect people. Will his ministering angels always be there?
There's just no one around to help.
We can only be certain that they can be.